Welcome back to the Delphi Economic Forum. I'm Endy Zemenides of the Hellenic American Leadership Council, proud partner with the Delphi Economic Forum. And since the last panel ended with a shout out to Simeon Somokos, I also want to commend Simeon and Delphi for their emphasis on regional developments and regions that sometimes don't get a lot of talk in policy circles or in the press. And today and this panel represents one of those. It's called the fourth and fifth C's, just because we're trying to put some great branding on the expansion of the 3 C's initiative. And I am really thrilled to be joined by Ian Brzezinski of the Atlantic Council, one of the great thought leaders behind the 3 C's initiative. Ivo Daalder of the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, and also the former U.S. Permanent Representative to NATO, and Phil Reeker, who as Assistant Secretary Assistant Secretary of State, got to work on several regional efforts and saw the beginning and the formation of the 3 C's. Even though we've seen it this way, I'm going to start with Ivo, because to really understand the 3 C's, Ivo, I think we have to understand the new security infrastructure in Europe post-February 2022. I think it would be correct, and I'll let Ian talk about it later, to position the 3 C's as part of the reaction to that. And how does that security infrastructure look differently as opposed to when you were at NATO?
So, you know, I was wondering why I was on this panel, because I'm not an expert on the 3 C's, and I was glad that it had the 4th and the 5th C, because I was prepared to talk about the Sea of the Tasmanian Sea, which I actually think ought to be part of this. You know, it's between five allies to New Zealand and Australia, but I guess that's not what you wanted me to talk about. So, you know, I mean, what changed on the 22nd of February, the 24th of February 2022, is the realization in every European chancellery, ministries of defense and foreign affairs, prime ministers' offices and presidents, and increasingly among the public itself, that we are back to an era where lines are being drawn on the European continent. We all grew up at a time where the Fulda Gap and the line across Germany, and that in the memorable phrase of Winston Churchill, the Iron Curtain, was real, and there was a division in Europe, and we understood that how you deal with that division is to be very strong militarily on one side, and on the basis of that strength, perhaps engage in conversation to try to change the internal dynamics on the other side. And after the end of the Cold War, that was gone. That Iron Curtain was gone, the division in Europe was gone, and the whole question was, how do you bring in that part of Europe, including Russia and the former Soviet states, into a new security situation? And there were differences between countries and within countries to the extent to which Russia would participate and could play that role, but there's no more any differences. There's a new line, and the line gets drawn all the way from the Barents Sea. Now with Finland firmly as a member, the 31st member of NATO, and Sweden, although the line there is different, it's in the Baltic Sea, in NATO, it goes all the way down along the 3 Baltic countries, Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Slovakia, and Romania, over to Turkey. And that line is going to be as strong a division in the world that we now live in as it was in 1985. It will be a major line that won't be crossed normally. It will be militarized increasingly, or at least prepared to be militarized from every inch on one side of the line. It presumably will also on the other side of the line, although not right now because they're all in, the forces are necessary in Ukraine. And that's a fundamental change in the security situation. It makes the idea that was central from 1989 onwards, that cooperation on common elements, whether that was in maritime or other places, the Arctic, of course, central to how we thought about it. No more. That cooperation is among members of NATO, and it is in contrast to confrontation, potential conflict, or at least the deterring of the conflict with Russia, all the way from the Arctic, which the 8 Arctic Council nations now, 7 are members of NATO, and even Canada recognizes that's a good thing. Took a while, by the way, for the Canadians. They thought they owned the whole place and the whole thing. Through the Baltic Sea, which is now a NATO lake, into the Med, and, you know, in the future, maybe even to the Sea of Tasmania.
Tasmania. Ian, the European order, the security structure, the post-war order, it's a post-war order. So this is also kind of a post-war order. And like one of the first European institutions, the European Steel and Coal, or Coal and Steel, the people who formed that said they wanted to make war not only impractical, but impossible. What did you hear from the European leaders that wanted to put this 3 Cs initiative? Is there any quote that we're going to remember in the future that's like that?
Well, no, there's no particular quote, but let's step back a moment and explain what is 3 Cs, because I don't think most people know what 3 Cs is. It is a Central and East European launched and led initiative to accelerate the development of cross-border energy, digital, and transport infrastructure. Is to address a systemic infrastructure gap between Western and Eastern Europe. They want to use it to drive forward economic growth, because infrastructure, cross-border infrastructure, fosters connectivity, drives growth, strengthens economic resilience, including energy security when you think about gas pipelines and such. And it has a military dimension, because it can help facilitate the transfer, including on a north-south basis, if you do it right, the movement of forces to reinforce one's frontiers. It is all about completing Europe, completing the vision of a Europe that's undivided, that is whole, that is prosperous, that is free, and that is secure. That is what drives it. And it has, you know, it's been making progress. The fact that Greece joined this initiative reflects its attractiveness. And I think this vision of integration, of infrastructural development is possible, because you look at what the region brings to actualize that, particularly with the inclusion of Greece. You're talking about 130 million people with an highly educated workforce. It's about 1/3 of the EU population. You're talking about $2 trillion, well over $2 trillion. It was more than $2 trillion before Greece joined, of GDP, with a growth rate, it's projected to be about 35% between now and 2030. That's a lot of growth, a lot of people. And you're talking about a region that features some of the highest rates of return for foreign direct investment. I'm talking double digits in the middle of COVID. And then the point is you build this infrastructure in this region, and there's about somewhere between a $500 billion and $1 trillion infrastructure gap. You build it in the right place, you structure it right, it's going to be used and it's going to be profitable. That's why 3 Cs to me is so exciting. It's leveraging the indigenous geoeconomic potential of this region to generate value that will increase the prosperity of the transatlantic community as a whole and increase the security of the transatlantic community as a whole, all in a way that will be consistent with fulfilling the vision, completing the vision of a Europe that's undivided, prosperous, free, and secure.
Phil, you worked on 3 Cs. Simultaneously, you worked on East Med. So I leave the 4th and 5th C is really to you. in your experience, what are the gaps and what did you learn from the East Med where the integration far surpassed what anybody thought it was going to get to when the era of trilateral started? So Greece is the link between the two. What can Greece bring from its experience in the East Med to the 3Cs?
Well, first, thank you, Endy, and let me thank Simeon and the Delphi Economic Forum. It's great to be here. This is a great way to wrap up. Following on from my two colleagues who talked about the context of history and geography, which matter, and we often forget that. Geography matters. Geography cannot be changed. History can not be changed, but it can be used to learn on how we deal with the current and the future. I think 3Cs complements extremely well what NATO has done. We've seen this shift of the line eastwards, which is a natural course of what we did in terms of expanding NATO and the security and stability that it brings to its AOR, its area of responsibility, its space. And the European Union itself has expanded also eastward and southward to bring the economic and prosperity factors into play. So when I was leading the European Bureau at the Department of State, we could see the complementary importance of 3Cs. These countries came together on their own. Poland showed great leadership in bringing together this north-south corridor. Greece becoming a member, the 13th member of this group, I think completes that corridor, as you say. And so truly, we do now have not just 3Cs, but you add the Aegean, you add the Eastern Med. I don't think we need to change names formally, but it brings that factor in. Energy, a key part of the Eastern Med, as we've seen. A crucial security zone as well. Greece with a leadership position there, with long experience, a lot of time in NATO, in the European Union, adds to that, and also the potential to connect perhaps the India-Middle East corridor as well. So you've seen this geographic completion from north to south, the Via Carpathia, which is so important for this. The key now, Endy, is to see things get done.
Yep.
We can come and we can talk about structures, informal, formal. That's what we've done in this remarkable period, this 75 years post-World War II, to bring stability and unimaginable prosperity to much of Europe, to expand that, to maintain that, to protect that from the threats that we see, say, from Vladimir Putin's Russia. We now need to get things done. We've expanded the institutions, but they are only as good as what they produce. So let's see infrastructure projects get finished. Let's see a cooperative approach. Let's utilize the financing that's available from partners, including the United States and the Development Finance Corporation, the European Union, Germany as a partner. Let's support Ukraine as an associate member of 3Cs in the enormous transformation that has to take place there. Reconstruction of Ukraine, even as we talk about the war, is a crucial thing we have to be thinking about. And that transition will not only be important in terms of energy resources, but in terms of the green agenda as well, making sure that we are focused on renewables, on the climate agenda. All of these things come together, and 3Cs can play a role in that, and terrific to have Greece as part of it.
Great, and I'm going to give you credit for it because I don't know if you're going to work it in, but Phil had a great quip that 3Cs creates a new corridor linking vodka to Tsipuro, right? Ivo, even last night, but you've been talking a lot about the Europeanization of NATO. Since Phil just talked about NATO, you know, having 3Cs, because these are all, almost all NATO countries, or are they all NATO as well as EU?
Austria.
Yeah, Austria's not. So, but is this something that makes a European partnership as 3Cs make it more appealing to American policymakers, potentially to the American public, that makes Europe a more attractive partner in the United States?
Well, it depends on the implementation, as Phil said, and but the reality is that anything that enhances European cooperation, and that cooperation enhances capacity and the ability to get stuff done, even if it's principally in the non-military sphere, strengthens the relationship between Europe and the United States, and is a good thing. The U.S. for too long has had a view that a weak, uncoordinated Europe is preferable because that's the one you can then dominate or lead or tell them what to do, etc. My problem with Europe has always been it's not strong enough, it's not coordinated enough, it doesn't pose enough of a challenge to us. And I think we are now living in an era with doubts about U.S. leadership, which are not going to go away by this election. That doubt is there for a long while, an understanding that finding new ways of cooperating, what I will call Europeanizing NATO, building the European pillar up, is both necessary, and finding ways to do that cooperatively within a structure that tries to build up the membership of the three Cs in terms of its relative economic capabilities vis-a-vis the rest of Europe. It's just a good thing, sort of by definition, and it doesn't have to take place within a NATO context. It is totally complementary to the extent that some of the infrastructure is being built with the eye of enhancing the capacity for reinforcement and defense. Good thing. Probably you want to have rail gauges work in the right way and physical infrastructure allow you to move equipment in order to defend yourself, because that you're now up to that new Iron Curtain, that new line of division, and in that too, it's going to be supportive of it. So this can only be a good thing from the U.S. perspective, as long as the U.S. starts living in a world where we see strong Europe as being fundamental to our security, as opposed to our ability to dominate, tell them what to do, which is really nice, but it doesn't usually work. So it's probably better to get to the other side of that.
Look at just add, yeah. The United States does support 3 Cs. It started from day one.
Right.
The United States made a $1 billion commitment to the initiative. It operationalized that $1 billion just last September with a $300 million fund that it has made available to the 3 Cs Initiative Investment Fund. So I would say it's actually game time for the 3 Cs initiative. Look, President Trump supported 3 Cs. President Biden supported 3 Cs. I was at the 3 C summit in Vilnius just a couple of days ago. The administration message as a strategic partner of 3 Cs is that we fully support 3 Cs. And by the way, Japan just joined as a strategic partner. So it's now the time for 3 Cs to become a little more than a talking shop and actually take some actions to actually create some tangible infrastructure that's got the 3 C stamp on it. That's what the United States is going to be looking for. And actually, when a country invests $300 million into an initiative in which it's not a deciding member, it has a right to expect a return.
So, and this is to both of you, but since you talked about infrastructure, and Phil, maybe I'll start with you, because one of the advantages of bringing Greece in is that infrastructure. There are 3 Cs members who are already benefiting from the infrastructure improvements of the United States, the interconnectors that Greece has with Bulgaria into the Balkans. We know from other 3 Cs members, if it wasn't for the floating regasification units in the north of Greece, Europe may have not made it through the last 2 winters. Something that you're particularly interested in is cable developments. Greece has the electricity interconnectors with Egypt, potentially with Cyprus and Israel. What are those, and those are a lot of East Med projects that you worked on, Phil. How do we extend that, take that success story and rapidly extend that into the 3 Cs network?
Again, it's going to be seeing these projects happen. The talk is great.
Yeah.
Awareness is important. It's intertwined with security. NATO provides this space, including all of the 3 Cs countries, with an unprecedented level of security, which gives the stability and confidence to investors. And so the other piece in this is the private sector. These things don't happen by governments alone. Private sector have great opportunities. As Ian says, the return on investment in this broad region that comprises the 3 Cs member countries can be remarkable. And so we're pointing foreign investors that are looking, first of all, how to get good investment in positive projects that meet 21st century goals, including reconstruction of Ukraine. So Greece brings experience in that. Certainly we've seen in the energy sector, as you highlighted, the interconnectors are crucial. They will remain crucial. They will grow. Ukraine will have to rebuild its entire energy infrastructure, and they're going to do that without this east-west Russian, hydrocarbon-based energy. They're going to do that looking north, looking south. Croatia, another member of 3Cs, with the Kirk LNG terminal, which was a project long talked about, which was actually done. That's, of course, also what the people of the countries and the region want to see, is projects that get finished. No more of this 30 years and one government promises this or that, tenders that go off in different direction. We have companies, international companies, multinational companies, indigenous national companies that are ready with expertise and skills that can take advantage of this financing and get these projects going and let the people see that they're actually completed so that they have something to show. And we know that if we really focus on this, we can do it in record time. So I think
I think that's important, that record time, because it's not only integrating this, but it's weaning Europe and these countries off of Russia. Is there something that's ready to go in that record time?
There are projects. I got to make a stark confession. I was actually skeptical of Greece coming in to 3Cs, because it's a Central European initiative, Central European economies. They have a unique Soviet experience and that sort of thing, and not a good one. But that's what they're dealing with. It binds them together and makes it unique. Well, the 3Cs made their decision, and actually, maybe there's some wisdom to that. Greece has got one of the most dynamic economies in Europe today. If there's anything about Greece, it's democracy and entrepreneurialism. And as Phil was pointing out, what 3Cs is all about is driving the capacity of private capital to foster infrastructure development. And Greece outmatches everybody when it comes down to understanding regional development. So this is a great asset for the 3Cs. So what to do with it? What should be the action plan? One, you got to institutionalize 3Cs. Greece ought to be pushing 3Cs to create a 3Cs office that operates 24/7. So there's a full 24/7 marketing arm highlighting the economic opportunities of the region, helping pull in foreign direct investment in the region. So institutionalize it, create a secretariat. Two, Greece, now it's a member, and it's a senior member because of its geoeconomic size. It should be investing in a 3Cs fund, because that's what 3Cs countries do. So don't sit on the outside and coast on it, free ride on it. Invest in the 3Cs fund. Third, focus on Ukraine. Ukraine is a moral imperative for the 3Cs because it's talking about democracy, supporting a democracy under attack. That's a humanitarian priority. It's a moral imperative. It's a strategic imperative to completing Europe, and it's an opportunity for the 3Cs because there's going to be about $1 trillion of money flowing into Ukraine once it's secure to reconstruct it. 3Cs should be part of that. Not just because it's an opportunity, but because the region understands the challenges that Ukraine is going through from the shared experience and geographic proximity. And moreover, if 3Cs were able to highlight and move out on a Ukraine project, that would elevate the stature of 3Cs exponentially in the views of the transatlantic community, if not globally. And quick answer, what about a pipe, what about a energy cable into Ukraine? What about a digital cable into Ukraine? Is there anything that can be done to kind of further institutionalize, secure, expand the Black Sea corridor that's helping Ukraine? That's where I'd be looking for Greece to bring its expertise, its capital, and its leadership to 3Cs, to bring it up to 3Cs 2.0.
I'll start with Ivo on this final question, but I'd like to get all your takes. I started off with saying the 3Cs initiative is very often viewed as an anti-Russia thing or a balance, a hedge against Russia. How about China? East Europe and the Balkan countries, and just when you were in government, it's like, oh my God, they're buying all the railroads, they're buying all this. We know when Greece was in crisis, the key infrastructure in Paris. But now you talk about the IMEC corridor, right, which is changing. Now India is being brought into this game. Is it 3 Cs? And as we know from East Med work, Phil, that a lot of the congressional support, even for the East Med Act, is because it was viewed as an anti-China initiative. Ivo, does China, do we have to play up this is a way to keep China out of Europe as well in Washington?
So I think our credibility on that issue is probably a little less than it is on a variety of other issues. I think the way to do it is to say dependence on any foreign actor far away is not a good idea. And the idea behind 3Cs is the integrative capacity of the countries who are part of it. I think the Ukraine element is preparing for the further integration of Ukraine into that system as it becomes part of the EU, ultimately, and of course of NATO. And to do it more about why it is important for us to cooperate because we're in this together, that has the benefit that you're less likely to be dependent on faraway foreign actors who may not have their best interest in. I think if you start running around and make everything about what people are doing about China, you can't then focus on the things that really matter. And the really matters on China is on high technology dependence in the digital sphere to make sure that the components are not spying and to make it part of that competitive edge as opposed to say China is this big enemy out there and everything we do needs to be sold within an anti-Chinese lens. I know that is a very American way of doing business. It doesn't get the credibility that it needs. And in many ways, it's not necessary because the incentive to do what needs to be done by the countries themselves, as Phil and Ian pointed out, is strong enough. So why don't you just build on that?
I think extending from Ivo's point, when we discussed with countries the challenges and the concerns about Chinese debt trap diplomacy, for instance, Belt and Road and what that meant, often the answer was, but what are the alternatives? And 3Cs provides an alternative, an organic alternative created by the countries that came together to form this, supported by others like the United States through DFC, the EU, Germany coming in, and private capital. And the governments will provide hundreds of millions, perhaps billions of dollars for this, but it's trillions that will come from the private sector to be a part of this. And they will do that because they will see the security, the confidence, the future, and the return on that capital by building this new 21st century infrastructure that is long overdue.
We're done. I want to thank you all. I know we're going to continue this conversation both in DC and next year, but because you were talking about being skeptical, I do want to give special shout out to those who foresaw this. Phil, Ambassador Pite when he was here. I see Katerina Soku, who did excellent work on this, Minister Papadopoulou, and I think I'm looking forward to when we get to discuss the 3Cs, the way we discuss it, East Med, remember how we did discuss it 9 years ago.
Have a 3C summit.
3C summit. And Simeon, next year we got to have at the bar a special, all the national drinks of the 3Cs countries. Thank you all.